There's a naval battle raging on coastal waters. The country's merchant fleet has shrunk from 100 to around a dozen in just 3 decades. By law, shipping between domestic ports must use Australian crews, but a loophole allows foreign-flagged vessels to muscle in. The union says that leaves local seafarers high and dry. And with such a small fleet, there are concerns about what happens in times of a national emergency. As Rachel Pupazzoni reports, it's become an election issue, with Labor promising to back a bigger national strategic fleet.
Earlier this year, seafarers Ben Sarash and Jesse Stevens were on a ship just like this one when their work came to an unexpected end.
I was out on deck and got called to the captain's cabin, and just an email basically saying the contract's terminated, and then they parked us up in the middle of nowhere and halfway between China and Hong Kong.
After more than 4 months at sea, the Australian crew were told they were no longer needed. They'd been moving iron ore from the Pilbara around to New South Wales before heading north to Asia as part of a 17-year-old supply contract between BHP and BlueScope Steel that expires in June. They were among 68 workers let go when TK Shipping Australia was told they were no longer needed to run the route.
None of us know what we're going to do, we just need ships on the coast. We need more jobs.
It highlights a key issue for Australia's dwindling shipping industry.
So it's becoming less and less competitive to use Australian shipping. Otherwise, we'd be using Australian shipping for as much as we could at a domestic level.
Australia's privately owned merchant fleet has shrunk to about 13. 30 years ago, there were 100. With little competition in the domestic market, companies can strike a better deal with foreign-flagged ships. Freight moved between Australian ports must be crewed by Australian seafarers, but there's a loophole that allows temporary licences for foreign-flagged ships to operate domestic routes, paying foreign crews Australian-level wages.
In theory they should, in reality they never do.
Paddy Crumlin is both the National Secretary of the Maritime Union of Australia and head of the International Transport Workers Federation. He argues foreign-owned ships cook the books.
There's a technical requirement, but they have false books. They've never paid even their international rate.
The Minerals Council says foreign workers are paid fairly.
There is a difference in wages, but there is not a significant difference in the wages that are paid between foreign workers on foreign vessels and Australian workers.
Lobby group Maritime Industry Australia wants more Australian crewed ships plying the coast. It says companies are pocketing millions of dollars by using foreign-flagged ships.
The cost differential between having a full foreign ship and a full Australian ship is somewhere in the order of $5 to $7 million US per annum.
And it says increasing Australia's shipping capacity back up to 100 vessels would boost the economy.
We could add $4 billion to GDP. We could increase jobs across the Australian economy by around 10,000, and we'd add $1 billion to direct tax receipts.
Australia's dwindling capabilities also raise concerns about national security.
We've virtually got no strategically significant ships under the Australian flag at all on the Australian register.
Sam Bateman, a former Royal Australian Navy Commodore, says a bigger merchant fleet would give the government the option to commandeer those vessels in times of a national emergency, unlike the late 1990s when the East Timor crisis tested Australia's readiness.
The Defence had to charter something like 27 foreign flag vessels to convey our troops and stores to support their deployment in East Timor. And that's, you might say, that's a very typical situation that we could face sometime in the future.
If elected, Labor wants to create a national strategic fleet. It says that'll boost national security, secure access to fuel supplies and add more local jobs. But the coalition argues Labor's policy will just see costs passed on to business. The government currently has a bill stalled in the Senate that it says will cut red tape, but the opposition's labelled that work choices on water, saying it'll cost Australian jobs. Until the election day on May the 18th, the fate of thousands of people dependent on Australia's merchant fleet remains very much at sea.